Sprint honors Steve's Facebook post on our new network.
I have tickets to the show. Anybody wants them? Message me.
I'll take them.
I said to message me, not post it in the comments. I disregard your request.
Come on, man.
No, follow private message procedures. You went rogue, now look at us. Having it out in the comment section.
Dude, you've turned into a monster.
You made me this way.
You're tuned in to Altered Geek.
Hello and welcome to Altered Geek. I'm your host, Steve Phillips, and joining me into this adventure into geekdom is Mike the Birdman Dodd.
Holy crap, I'm back! It's been forever, man.
He exists.
I do, and because I can, here's the sound of goats. I just made work for you.
That's fine, I don't mind.
And if you're wondering what the hell we're talking about, if you follow us on Twitter at SCP21, at BirdmanDodd, and at Altered Geek, we decided to have a rather involved Twitter thread tonight. So we do invite conversation with you, of us who join us on the show via our social media. And we were talking about what makes podcasting better. And we got on the subject of swearing and emphasis. And frequent GCRN host TFG1 Mike was arguing that swearing makes things better. And we got, I think it was Michael Powers was in on it, Kevin Thompson. A lot of us were like, yeah, no.
It was actually hilarious because I put tonight we ride. Just kidding. And I says I'm rejoined by Birdman Dodd for Altered Geek tonight for a conversation that should be interesting. And then it says hashtag gets no reference. By the way, if you listen regularly, you know why it's there. Please, no goat sounds.
Yeah,
and Mike was just going off, and I says, "Stop swearing on the show." And then I did the Office thing. Nope, don't like that. And he's going on about swearing enhances podcasts. And
in what reality?
Did you notice though? After about 3 or 4 threads, he lost it, and he started swearing to enhance his tweets.
I'm like, oh yes, clearly you are armed with a superior vocabulary.
It was funny because Powers is like, he says, I understand and respect that, even though I swear I try not to. I'm just saying I prefer no limits. And it's like, okay, I get it, And Powers is like, I agree with Steve. Foul language never accomplished anything that couldn't be said better with a broader vocabulary. Using foul language in a critique of, well, anything is just poor, lazy, and sloppy. And then he admits that he's lazy.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, like, and then he's like, well, then I guess I'm lazy. I'm like, should you not wish to improve your craft? And I counterpointed, swearing can be okay if you use it in use of a punchline, a joke, or even in service of a reaction. Like, for example, here's your F-bomb. If I said, that was fucking awesome, like how Kevin Smith does, that's emphasis. That's okay. Or if you use it in service of a cleverly crafted joke or setup, it works. But it's really hard to hit the mark consistently. If you're just dropping it for the sake of dropping it, then you lose all meaning behind it.
Yeah, and see, I get from that stance. Like, that I don't have as much of an issue with. Because, I mean, granted, I still don't prefer it on my particular content, or at least this particular show. Like any other show, I don't really care as much. But I think it's because this one's hit over 300 episodes, and I'm like, it's got a catalog behind it. I'm not to say that I haven't done that in the past. I'm just trying to be cleaner. But not that the slight joke won't come out occasionally. But yeah, I mean, it's... I don't try to put limits per se. I just try to, I still have no problems with like controversial topics and in different ways of elaborating the 2 cents that we have on it. It's just, yeah, it was funny because he just kind of started losing it in Twitter, and everybody was like jumping on the bandwagon like, hey, Mike, you suck.
My favorite, and I have to toot my own horn, I retweeted him, and I used the Arrested Development thing, or like, narrator voice. It didn't. Meanwhile, Steve Megatron has to find out what to do with his herd of goats. And Buster
Yeah.
Bluth.
What's really funny is there was another episode, and it was a while back. I had him on, and he was just on some kind of an angry tirade that night. Like it was crazy, and I'm not beating Mike up because Mike's awesome too, but there are times that it grades on me with the random swearing, and I started putting every barnyard animal over him. There was like literally like cow sounds, goats, sheep. There was like a horse or something. Like it was just random like animal sounds like because I was like, okay, I can't use the goat sound like 3 times in a row. I got to switch it. And so it was just, I was having fun with it.
So you had this cacophony of like farm animals.
Yeah, it was like Old McDonald's farm had suddenly hit my podcast, and it was crazy.
In this case, swearing does enhance a podcast. In this one isolated case,
Mike McGarby's had a farm.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Anyways, I'm done beating up on Mike.
We love you, buddy.
Yes. He's gonna, that's gonna come out later. But
and if you want to join the conversation at Altered Geek and at SCP-21 and at Birdman join in, have the fun.
Yes, because he's gonna attack us next week or after he listens. So yeah. So if you're looking to interact with the show, as we suggested, there's obviously many ways to do this through social media or, geekcastradio.com or the other feeds. But you can always hit us up on at Altered Geek and at SCP-21 and at Birdman Dodd. And if you want to use the hashtag of Altered Geek, you can let us know what you're geeking out to this week. So anyways, without further ado, I have a question that I'm going to ask for next week for the listeners, and it's, what do you look forward to in geek news now with all the latest going on? Because obviously we have like the news of Conroy becoming Bruce Wayne officially on video, and the Sony Disney debacle with Spider-Man, and a new He-Man revival, and plethora of other news going on. Like Microsoft finally restoring Skype back to its original design before they destroyed it. And then all the awesome things going on in podcasting. So basically, what strikes your geeky chords?
I like turtles.
I like turtles. I knew there was something coming. I was just waiting to hear what it was.
Yep.
It was going to be something random, and I knew it. So anyways, as I mentioned off air, and as I mentioned to the listeners last week, I built a new computer, and it's quite nice. And I was thinking of, what am I going to do with the old machine? Because I'm going to use it for the kids, and it's still got like 12 gigs of RAM in it, and it's an old Core i3 dual core processor, and it's got the built-in graphics, so I don't need a dedicated graphics card in it, which is nice. But I've also got to take one of the SSD hard drives out of my current machine and put it in there, so it'll have a hard drive. But being that Windows is locked to a specific machine, I was thinking I would try, because I wrote this article a ways back on commando.com about the Zorin OS, which is basically a Linux version that's as close to Windows as you can get. So I was thinking about trying that out on my old PC just to see how well it works. Because I've dabbled in Linux before, but not really had any reason to switch. So I think that it's like the perfect time to actually try it.
Yeah, because if it blows up, who cares?
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not being used for anything right now anyway. It's basically a shell sitting under my desk. It's a kickstand. And then I was scouring, because I don't know if you're familiar with the new iTunes categories thing.
Kind of, but refresh me.
So anyways, Apple recently decided to, as a part of their Apple podcast thing, and because, let's face it, Spotify is stealing ground left and right from them, between companies they're buying up and just innovating the podcast space, and Apple's been floundering on it for the last 10 years. They finally created new categories and rearranged things, and so that sent everybody into kind of a tizzy on everything on iTunes, and kind of deciding how things are going to kind of play out. So anyways, they created all these new categories, and you still kind of have to put them in the categories that you want them in. And it doesn't, some of them make more sense, some of them don't. So like under the TV and film category, how there was nothing under it before, now they have like after shows, they have TV review shows, they have film reviews, they have film history, they have like all these like different delineations underneath these different categories. Although the only thing that kind of stinks is they kind of took out the area where comic books could be, and it's like manga and animation. So like if you've got a comic book related show and it's not on manga, it kind of doesn't really make sense to be there, but there's nowhere else it can go. So like that's where the pull bag resides, and that's why it's like in the top 20 in there, because it's not really, but it is in that category. So it just doesn't make sense on some of the things. But yeah, we've had a couple of our shows show up in different categories, like pretty high up within the top 20 of those like delineations, just because they're very specific and niche. Like All Things Transformers shown up, Tooncast, some of the other ones. So yeah, it's pretty neat. But anyways, I saw, I was looking because the place that I work, I was just checking to see if our podcast there had registered in the top anything on the lists. And under the religion and spirituality longest running shows category, you know, it's all basically like Christian podcasts and everything else. And then I see Smodcast and Fat Man on Batman in there. And
That's
I'm like,
awesome.
and I'm like, as far as I know, like Kevin Smith's shows in the Christian category doesn't seem right. So like somebody's like, I'm just going to put it somewhere randomly so that it shows up when you're not looking for it.
You know what? I think to take advantage of the algorithm, you should rebrand this show as a Pastafarian themed podcast, so we can be the only religious podcast dedicated to the flying spaghetti monster, and then we can be number one on Spotify. Let's take advantage of it.
As sad as that is, like I was like, okay, you know, like how do you even get in all of, you know, these random categories and kind of pick them, like per se, like it's just I don't know, it was kind of weird just seeing some of that, some of the shows that probably shouldn't have been in certain categories, and other ones that clearly have, you know, like been pushed to the top. It's I don't know. And that's the other thing that kind of bothers me about Apple Podcasts, like, is the majority of the podcasts that show up are not like the podcasters that have been around for 10, 15 years. It's all these celebrity conglomerates or people that are on television already. And, you know,
because they got money to push it.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like, because you can buy placement in there. And I'm not saying that like shows can't show up in certain categories, you know, just based on their merit alone, but predominantly it's all celebrity hosted shows that are showing up, or companies that have big dollars behind them. And so it's kind of, I see it as more of a rigged system with Apple Podcasts. And I've kind of always seen it that way. It's kind of that necessary evil that they're like 60-70% of your podcast downloads, but so you can't like bear to be without them, but you don't really want to be friends with them either.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what your thoughts are on it, but that's kind of my mentality.
I figure money solves everything, which is unfortunate, but I'm hoping eventually it'll sort itself out. Although, if somebody's really clever, they could take advantage of it. Someone will figure out how it all gets sorted, and you'll see like Joe Rogan at the top of the religious podcast. In fact, please make that happen, because that would make me really happy. But I'm telling you, Steve, we see a vulnerability here. We see an opportunity. We got to become the flying spaghetti monster for like 2 weeks. See what happens.
I have no problem moving it around just to see what happens. Because, like, I'm just curious to see if the show would make a blip on the radar just because the category went, like, so far left field that nobody's like, or everybody's like, what is this doing here?
Yeah.
You know,
We start off each show with a prayer to the flying spaghetti monster just to see how many people tune in. Telling you, man, there's a marketing opportunity here.
or you start doing random ads that are not even for real companies.
Oh my god! I was watching a Kevin Smith podcast. This was when this was like very early on, and he was talking about this grill, and for some reason he starts babbling on about anal sex, and he worked it into an advertisement with his co-host Ralph Garman, and he's like, "This is the man grill sold on that anal show," and I got to thinking, all the stupid products you could advertise on a podcast, because usually it's like audible.com, ExpressVPN, DoorDash. By the way, to hell with those guys. They steal your tips. But I got to thinking just like stranger companies you could approach, because in my particular field, I get approached with ads for, do you want to review this product? Do you want to be sponsored? And one of the strangest ones, and I've talked about this on Twig, and I may have mentioned it on Altered Geek too. I got an email about 2 years ago, and it was around PAX time, which is the Penny Arcade Expo.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an ad saying, "Hey, are you a gamer? Are you playing games for so many hours a day? Yes, yes. Would you like to have your prostate massaged?" And I'm like, wait, what? And I read the article, and it was this sex toy company trying to pitch gamers on a prostate massager. So, like,
No?
and I was laughing so hard. It's like, yes, when I'm playing Halo, I want my butt massage. Give me the butt plug, please. And I was just laughing so hard. And everybody in the industry was sharing this email on Twitter. And I'm like, and the Penny Arcade guy's like, "Oh my god, you got it too?" I'm like, "Yeah, isn't this weird?" So yeah, you'd be surprised companies that'll advertise on podcasts and other things. You get some weird ones.
Like, it's just I have nothing to say. Like, I don't even know. It's like, that would just be the most absurd, like, strangest thing in the world.
I didn't believe it till I went back and read the email, because I told Alex about it. He's like, "You're full of crap. Show me." And I pull up the email. He's like, "Oh my god, dude." I'm like, "I know." Oh, it was so good. That guy must have gotten so many replies to his email. Is like, "What is wrong with you?" Like, seriously, how do you pitch like Game Informer? Do you want a prostate massager?
That's so weird. Yeah, I don't even know.
You want a controversy? I'll bring you controversy.
It's never a dull moment, man. Anyways, changing series and scenes with like a 180-degree twist here. Voiceover star Eric Bauza was talking on a video recently about replicating and paying homage to the legendary voices of the Banana Splits. I don't know if you've ever seen that original show.
I have, although the only Banana Splits thing recently I've seen is the new horror movie.
Yeah, and they basically do like a Five Nights at Freddy's with it.
Yeah, I'm about to say, cool idea, weird way to go with it, but why not?
Yeah, I was like interested to begin with, and then I saw that it was like a horror movie, and I'm like, no.
No,
that's why it's going.
That's why you should be interested. That's a cool genre twist.
Yeah, I don't know, but it says now available on digital, coming to Blu-ray and DVD. Like, it's a direct to DVD series, which whatever, they're trying to refresh the Warner Brothers Hanna-Barbera library with new versions of things, because why not?
I mean, it's a cool idea, it just, you have to have the right person behind the camera, because direct-to-video horror or horror is a wonderful genre unto itself. And if you get the right people writing it, directing it, and producing it, you can have some really cool movies there, like fantastic B-movie level stuff. I mean, it doesn't have to be like Wes Craven or Tobe Hooper levels of masterpiece horror, but it can be B-level Charles Band Full Moon Entertainment levels of goofiness. And I think the Banana Splits movie had the potential to do that. It's got some cool kills in it, but that's pretty much about it. The Five Nights at Freddy's, if they screw that up, there will be blood.
See, I've never cared for that whole like genre, like, and then the people that are like doing the like, oh man, I'm scared.
See, I don't get how they screwed up Slender Man so bad. It had such a cool potential and backstory and lore behind it, but the movie sucks. I reviewed it, I guess, a couple of years ago now, or last year anyway, and it was just so paint by the numbers that it was boring. And you look at the rise of horror movies being more popular now, especially with the Conjuring universe, with like Conjuring 1, 2, Annabelle, and all those, though there's been diminishing returns on that franchise. The last movie that came out, Annabelle Comes Home, was okay, but the one previous to that, The Curse of Il Llorona, which is about the Mexican weeping lady, was jump scare the movie. And it sucks because horror, I always mispronounce it. It's supposed to be horror. Horror movies can be really neat. Like right now, there's that Crawl movie, which is underappreciated. It's about the like alligator, which is weird. And then there's that 47 Meters Down, which is like an underwater shark movie. So okay. And then next month, It comes out, and It Chapter 1 was fantastic. So there's a lot of legs left in the genre, but taking an old IP like the Banana Splits and doing it into a horror movie, like I said, right team has to be behind it. It can't be half-assed.
Yeah, and I haven't been able to get into that whole like horror genre stuff like in a good amount of time. So,
I think, like, let me ask you this. Is it because it's scary? Is it because it's bloody? Or because you don't like is there some other reason?
it's kind of all of the above.
Because
I never was a big fan of it, but like I really don't watch any of it now.
Because I think the Conjuring movies, both of them, are really good for fans that are not genre people, because they're scary on their own merits. They don't need blood. There's no blood in these movies. Well, in Conjuring 2, but it's a vision, so it doesn't count. They're scary because ghosts, as opposed to like Freddy Krueger or Jason, which is, you're going to see blood. That's why you're going. But I really do recommend you give the Conjuring movies a whirl, especially if you can immerse yourself in the mindset and the right environment to watch it in. If you can watch it late at night by yourself or with someone who is willing to share that experience with you, it's magical.
Apocalypse Pony. So anyways, we had some feedback before we get to the main event. We had some feedback on the last episode, partially on, well, the last two, but Brad mentions that, on the episode, Mike and I talked about not watching certain shows, mostly just because like I don't get into newer shows as much anymore, and Mike's just a curmudgeon. He says, yeah, mostly because of access, I've missed a lot of the relevant shows everyone's talking about. I gave Stranger Things 3 episodes in season 1, but it didn't grab me. I hate being told something's the best thing since sliced bread,
That's so unfortunate.
and I have to watch it. I'll decide what I like and want to watch. Go ahead, make your comment.
I was about to say, that's so unfortunate. Stranger Things was something I marathon through. I did all 3 seasons in a week, and it's probably one of the best things I've seen in the last 5 years. Like, I was so in love. It's the biggest love letter to the 80s I've seen since the Goldbergs. It's done right. The score is fantastic. The way it's shot is beautiful.
What exactly is the premise and the draw to it? Because I've not...
Okay,
Like,
so...
I don't typically pick up new shows. I'm just asking out of curiosity what everybody's...
Okay, so the pitch is this kid goes missing in this little town in Indiana, and nobody can figure out why. There's also a government energy facility nearby doing experiments. They have an experiment one day, something comes through. They don't know what it is. So these kids are looking for their missing friend, and they cross paths with this government experiment. At one point, a little girl escapes from the government facility who's been held in there all her life, doesn't know how really to talk to people, is really strange. She has psychic powers, and they start to find out that her and their missing friend are connected. And it's these friends coming together over the course of a summer to find their missing friend, to help this little girl and uncover this conspiracy which has been buried under the town for so long. And the first season's fantastic. The second season's a little weaker in places. The third season's fantastic. The soundtrack is phenomenal. Not just the score, but the actual soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
And you get a career-defining performance by Winona Ryder. David Harbour plays the town sheriff. Finn Wolfhard, I think that's his name, is the lead kid. And Glenn Mazzaro, I want to say that's his name. He plays another one of the kids. Like, the kids are the heart of this show, and you believe them. Like, you cry. Like, there's a moment at the end of the third season. One of the characters is reading a note from another character, and I cried because that's how powerful it was. And I haven't connected with a show on an emotional level like that in years. So my recommendation to you is watch the entirety of the first season. It's only 8 episodes, and make up your mind then. Because 3 episodes is just setup. And then it really gets going. And since you're a child of the 80s, watch how things are shot. Listen for music cues. Look in the background. You'll see things you'll recognize from, like, Goonies and Ghostbusters and all that stuff. Like, the people who made the show, I can't remember, it's a pair of brothers. They genuinely cared for their craft. And it's probably some of the best event television I've seen in, like I said, the last 5 years easy.
That's probably why Microsoft had that whole Windows 1.0 thing.
Mm-hmm.
Which is funny enough that they used it as kind of part of the promo. But yeah, so then he has more feedback saying that while the scream effect to cover Mike's mouth scared the crap out of me at work in an industrial area wearing Bluetooth earmuffs, he says, I agree with Mike, and I'm not a big fan of ad reads because we were talking about advertising and podcasts. He was like the show host live reads in podcasts, especially when the host trying to put across that they've been friends with the sponsor for some time and regularly use their products. One podcast I listened to has a stop halfway through with a voiceover. Now a word from our sponsors, only to have 3 seconds of silence before continuing the show. Then he says, I see Patreon as a similar thing. When I started podcasting, it was a hobby, something for me and some friends to do on a weekend. Now nearly 500 produced shows released. It's still a hobby. Yearly hosting fees are one of the costs, as well as the microphone. Tried Patreon for a few months and didn't get a single sign up, so I canned it. I really need to get my... Then he started talking about his 2013 gaming PC updated which mine was about that old. Mine was a 2012. But he said he's got a bunch of hard drives to back everything up because the 2 terabyte was completely full. And then we were talking about podcasts, and he says, as for old episodes, I have to say my favorite series is still The Beast Unleashed. I'm not going to say why. If you haven't listened to it, go and download it now. But yeah, I have to agree with the Patreon thing. Like, I tried it, and I was not very impressed with the whole methodology. And you pretty much have to have a following just to get anybody to actually do it.
Well, yeah, like Patreon is one of those platforms where you have to have a substantial following. You have to provide value content, and you can't just be like, I'm a podcaster, support the show. Okay, that's cool, but why am I giving you $5? Why am I giving you $10? Like, some people I know started their Patreon because they thought they had a following. They got $2. And yay, that's $2 you didn't have before, but you're not offering anything, especially if your content's not as consistent. And other people have a Patreon because they have a substantial following and they do nothing. So it sits there as a constant money generator, but they don't offer anything, which is really, really unfortunate. Other people have been able to take their Patreons and actually turn their podcasting into legitimate gigs because they treat it like a job. One of the best examples, I think, is a podcasting wrestling show called Going In Raw by Steven Larson, formerly of Machinima and ETC. And those guys do really well. Any other Patreons for artists or people who are cosplayers, they provide photo sets, they provide Polaroids, postcards, calendars, phone calls. They interact with their fans. But they have those. They have fans. They have people who know what their content is going in. It's very hard to start a Patreon from the ground up. I mean, people have asked me, why don't I do a Patreon for Twig? And I've often said, Twig will always be free because I believe the news and information should always be free, be available to the people. It's a journalistic ethic that I've held on to since college. And I've got a following. I know I do because I've had several successful GoFundMes for medical expenses or other things for, say, Dr. Wiley have happened. So you don't also want to go to that well too often because maintaining a Patreon, you're also expected to maintain a certain level of quality, consistency, and transparency with what you're spending it on. Another Patreon guy, this guy started to have a Patreon, and he was asking for them to support his show. This guy made more money than he knew what to do with. And I was wondering, why do you need a Patreon if you're making like $60,000 a year? Like, you don't need that. That's not fair to your audience, in my opinion anyway.
No. Yeah, that's my thing is like, see, if it made enough to like break even or to pay for like going to events or things like that for, added coverage, great. I'm not expecting to get rich. Like, yeah. I would much more prefer to be somebody who's one of the more or less influential discussion based, podcasters, professional that people come to rather than having to say, hand me your money so I can be important. And so like, I guess that's kind of where I stand with it. Mm-hmm. Like we had plans to do a basically like a subscription model on Geekcast Radio. And the ability is there in the site, and it's not turned off. It's there, which, if people feel obligated or like they'd like to do that, that's a way to, get involved, and that would help us not only with hosting things, but also, just for producing extra content. But it's not a mandatory thing. And we have, the dynamic ad insertion in the podcast, which it's helpful to some degree. I mean, it pays for itself, but it's I don't know. I don't want to do like the live reads. I don't want to do things where I'm being disingenuous with everything, and I really don't want to do the whole Patreon thing because again, like I can't do promise like full amounts of things to come to these people, and so again, I would rather just produce really good content and have my footprint all over the place than necessarily be rich at it.
Well, that's another thing too. I mean, when people do live reads of their thing, unless they have a radio or broadcasting background, it never sounds natural. Like, I use Dollar Shave Club every day, or I've been da 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 da. I use Blue Apron or Hello Fresh or whatever the friggin' thing is this month. It
See,
never sounds natural.
I always had to script out my stuff when I would do it, like ahead of time. So, like, like for instance, I'm looking at this old script. Altered Geek is brought to you by Gamefly.com. Sign up today for a premium free 30-day trial with one game out at a time by going to GameflyOffer.com/Altered Geek. And then just going on from there. I mean, it takes you out a little bit, but it's not as bad as like yeah. So the podcast is brought to you by Gamefly. You can get 30 days and one game out, and go to gameflyoffer.com/altered geek. I don't even know if it still works, but that was one of the scripts, just roughly. So I mean, like I have to do that, or else it just sounds like I'm trying to just mash it together.
Yeah, like I said, it's very hard to sound natural, to sound conversational, and unless you drop it in at the right point in your show, it never sounds right. Like, I don't know, like even for Twig, I do the dynamic ad. I add 5 seconds a silence in after a review or a certain news story, and it just goes in. Whatever, it pays for itself.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily mind it. But again, it's just I don't know. If there was a way to have it, on a free model, which that would be awesome, but I would do it. And it was that way for a very long time. It just, I've primarily been the main funder of the web hosting space and the one that manages all the, back end stuff. So, So yeah, anything that alleviates or automates as much as possible, and it takes takes care of itself, like I'm good with. So in that regard, see, and this actually leads rather nicely into our conversation about the main event, which is subscriptions. So I posed this question on Twitter either earlier this week or something. I was alluding to the fact I was going to talk about this anyway. But I said, anyone starting to have or already in general getting subscription fatigue. It seems like every network and show has one now. You've got Hulu, Netflix, Amazon, HBO, CBS All Access, and then we're going to have a Warner Brothers one and an AT&T one. We're going to have a Disney Plus is going to be an add-on for Hulu, but also separate. We've got DC Universe. We've got, it's getting to be more and more and more and more. So it seems like they've, honestly, if you subscribe to them all, granted, you get most of their back catalog that network has ever produced, which is better than any other option you've ever gotten. But you're also spending as much as premium cable when you add it all up. So I feel like the subscription model, not only for streaming, but for software, is going to run dry at some point, or have to evolve and create some kind of a better value, because at some point people are going to say, I'm done, cancel everything, or I'm going to blitz all the content, or I'm just not going to do any of it and I'm going to pirate it all. So, I figured that, at some point, something's going to have to change in the subscription model.
Well, it comes down to value. Like, for example, Netflix is losing a lot of shows due to licensing agreements expiring. Like, CBS is having They have CBS All Access. NBC's getting one. Warner Brothers is getting one. Technically, already is that DC one, but it's getting consolidated into another Warner Brothers app at some point. So you have to wonder, what value are these services offering to you? Disney Plus is committed to providing new Star Wars and Marvel content, and for $7 a month, I'm okay with that. Or $90 a year, who gives a crap? Netflix is $15 a month. Now I'm starting to question, but you also get things like Dolomite Is My Name with like Eddie Murphy, and the Scorsese picture with Robert De Niro, The Irishman. That looks fantastic, and they put $100 million into that. So it's going to be, with these subscription services, it's going to be what you're getting in terms of new content you can't get on your CBSs, your ABCs, whatnot. And unless the content is that good for you to pay to go somewhere exclusive, then I don't know. Because, for example, you in the States, you guys have to watch Star Trek Discovery on CBS All Access or on Netflix, right?
Yep, there's no choice.
Yeah,
It's CBS All Access.
Yeah, in Canada, we get that on the Space Channel. That airs on terrestrial TV. We don't have to pay for it. We also get it through an app called Crave, which is similar to your Hulu, though not nearly as rich. Although Canada's getting Hulu next year, I think. I'm curious to see what content's going to be offered on it. But yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, right now, I subscribe to Netflix, Crave, Funimation, which is anime, though I am gifted a subscription there thanks to my press contacts. I used to subscribe to Shudder, which is a horror movie service for $5 a month. Not a bad value. Crave, and I am planning on signing up for Disney Plus. So that's 6 services in addition to my regular cable package, which is about $90. There has to be some innovation. Now, the thing that sold me on Disney is they're promising a huge back catalog. Their day one stuff I'm not super thrilled with, but they sold me with The Mandalorian. I was like, all right, I don't want to pirate. I work in the media industry. Being a pirate's being a douchebag. I want to help. Am I going to get HBO Max? Probably not. HBO content's a little bit more expensive than what I want to pay for. Am I going to watch The Watchmen show? In a roundabout way of saying it, I'm sure I'll find a way. Friends will probably get it, or I'll borrow logins. But even that's a thing, too, because I think it was Comcast and Disney, or one of the big major cable companies, had said they're going to crack down on password sharing.
It was Hulu.
Yeah, and I get that, because I guess in your terms of service you agree not to do that. And people were getting all up in arms about that. I'm thinking, well, you kind of signed up for their service, so you kind of got to do what they say. I mean, obviously, don't be a douchebag, but...
Well, you can get around that. I mean, with the whole thing of all you need to do is honestly just do private window.
Like, what I do for Netflix is I pay for extra screens so I can have more people share my Netflix plan, which I'm good guy Mike. I have like 4 people sharing my Netflix. Probably 2 more than I probably should let share, but I digress. Yeah, like there has to be some level of fatigue setting in at some point, because with all the services, you don't know what's being available next year or next month. I know one big thing people were talking about is The Office is leaving Netflix, and they just paid a couple $1 million to have Friends stick around for another couple years. So it's so weird to see all these different services go everywhere to go exclusive. Like, it's getting to be as much as a cable package, but arguably you're getting more because you're getting a big back catalog.
Which is true, and I do give them that you are getting the big back catalog. And like I myself, like we have Netflix, which I'm thankful enough that my press contacts got me that as well. Although it's still difficult to find their screeners because you have to go through some weird way of getting to them now, and I've never been able to get them to work right. So, for like
I never thought to ask for a comped Netflix account. I just assumed whatever.
you know that they actually will give you one if you were on their press account before when they were doing the screeners,
I didn't know that.
because they will not let you do the screeners now unless you have a Netflix account.
That's so weird.
So they will comp you a Netflix account to watch the screeners, even though you can't watch them on that Netflix account, but you need the Netflix account to log in to get the screeners. It's really stupid.
That's really ass backwards.
It's so convoluted. Like, I could never figure out how to get the screeners, and so I'm like, I got free Netflix. And granted, I use it for, like, material that I can use here, but it's still it's really weird, like, either way, like how you have to go about it, and so it's kind of just backwards. But it's either way, we have like PureFlix. I have an access to Hulu, and through sharing, and it's I mean, I have pretty much my pick of everything, but I even then I rarely watch anything through any of that stuff. And like I will, half the time I'll like stream stuff through the websites they come from, rather than have to go hunt it down somewhere or whatever. And yeah, you'll see some commercials, but whatever. I mean, I can watch it pretty much right after, if I so choose. But I've also been doing this thing too, where after a show I like ends, I just stop watching the show. Like, cause I have like this weird memory that I can remember the entire plot line and everything that happens in the show. So I literally don't need to watch the show again. Do I occasionally go back and watch episodes? Yes, but I don't ever really go back and blitz a whole series. And so to me, like, even with all the value that's being provided by all these subscriptions, I don't, and I get it if you're dealing with a big conglomerate like a Hulu, like a Disney, like, and they've got this large back catalog. Yeah, I can definitely see the value. And as Powers kind of mentions in a roundabout way of saying that, really they aren't charging enough, I mean, for everything you're getting. He says, like, I don't generally mind subscriptions because I can sign up for a service for a month out of the year, binge what I can, and cancel without penalty or the hassle of dealing with a cable subscription. I feel like that alone gets overlooked with the subscription model talk. And then Kal-El 2000 on Twitter also says, like, a lot of these shows are going to go out of business. There'll be like 2 or 3 like there are now when it's all over, about 10 or 15 streaming services, too many, they just won't survive. Which, I'm like, yeah, I can see like Hulu, Disney, because like Disney owns majority stake in Hulu, with the Fox deal. And then you've got Amazon and Netflix; those will hang on for sure. But maybe AT&T streaming service might, and then CBS All Access is the only thing they have going for them is they have all the Trek content coming,
and that's not enough to keep them alive long term.
Not long term, but they're gonna now, with getting Paramount back with them, they'll have that whole movie catalog to come back, which will help them.
If they choose to expand it, though.
Which I think they are. I think that was the plan. I was reading something about the CBS All Access or CBS and Paramount merger, which it'll be CBS Paramount is the name of the company. Real original, it's like NBC, Universal, Comcast. It's yeah. Anyways, so the plan is with their combined catalog, they're saying that they'll be bigger than, like, or at least one of the biggest, rivaling almost Disney. Like, nobody else would have the massive catalog CBS and Paramount have collectively, but that's debatable. But either way, I think that a lot of it's going to end up on All Access. And you'll see a lot of new content through the cross-pollination of the two different, networks. So, but yeah, I mean, now I guess to pose this question, do you think that because the subscription model works, as far as the video content's concerned. What do you think about the subscription models? Now, I know audio is not a big deal because people have been doing that forever, for like radio purposes and everything, like music and your Spotify's and things like that. Because that's more of a convenience thing, and people are more likely to splurge on that just because people like to just have things to randomly listen to, 24/7. But do you think that the subscription model is going to harm like software and like plugins for websites? Because like a lot of plugins for WordPress are starting to go subscription based too.
I'll tell you, one of the most bullcrap things I've ever dealt with is the Adobe Creative Suite. That going subscription model, you can kiss all my ass for that one. That sucks. Is it smart to go subscription? Yes. You know why? Because people will need it. People will pay it. It's dirty. It's a dirty move. But then again, do you remember when Photoshop and all those programs used to be like $2-3 grand?
I remember when they were like insane amounts. Like I think it was like $200 for Adobe Sound Booth, which was relatively cheap for what it was. But I remember Photoshop being like, "Oh, you can get the $800 like entry level package of Photoshop."
Yeah,
or,
when I went to
Illustrator.
college, my first year, I think I got the student package for Photoshop, and I think I paid $800-900.
It's ridiculous.
Oh yeah, when I bought Final Cut for college, this would have been about 2006. I think I paid $1,000 or more. I think I may have even paid $2,000 for it. I'm not sure, but it was a lot.
Yeah, and see that to me just seems like a giant scam, because they can, they're purposely leveraging people. Like, well, you need us, so you're gonna pay us what we want, and just to make sure you're not using an old version that can be pirated really easily, we're going to have you on a subscription plan so that you stay with the newest version. So that's incentive for you to pay us.
Yeah, and basically they can brick the old versions anytime they want.
Yes, they can. They've even claimed as much, that they have like these open scanners that are like these back doors that they have into their old software that they can legitimately go in and find out if you're using an old copy or not, even if you're not connected to the Creative Suite, and shut you down.
That's so dirty.
I had it happen on one of my computers here, actually.
What?
Adobe Audition, I had an older version of it on the machine, and they went in and bricked it. It says, you got 30 days, and then you can't use the software anymore. And I was like, oh, really? Uninstall.
I'll show you.
I'll reinstall my bricked old version, and then we'll see who's happy now. Or you go back and you're like, system restore to yesterday. But yeah, I mean, and I see that as being a really dirty move. I don't see the subscription thing. Like I know that they've been using it for like Xbox Live and PlayStation Network, but I don't see it working for things like Stadia and things like that.
Stadia, it's weird because you have to pay access on top of access. Like you get so many games for free. That's cool. You get access to the Stadia servers. But if you want to buy a game like, say, Watch Dogs or Cyberpunk, you have to pay on top of that. Plus, you only own a digital copy of that game. If you unsubscribe from Stadia, what do you do? So I don't know. Like, I think there's a free version of Stadia because I know the premium is like $9.99 a month. I think.
Which, I mean, I think that every subscription service is purposely going to that like $8-9, like the like $6.99 to the $12.99 a month, because they're like, oh, it's kind of a sweet spot, but $9.99 is like where we want to be.
Yeah, like that's a good value in my opinion. In my opinion, this is how I break down subscription models because I'm a fat guy. How many pizzas is it? If it's the cost of a large pizza, one large pizza, that's one less large pizza for me to eat a month. I'm okay with that cost. That's how I balance my books, is my pizzas or how many video games is this going to cost me? And it's ridiculous, but it works. Yeah, like the $9.99 seems to be the sweet spot. Anything above that, people start to hem and haw. about it. Like Netflix, I see a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm cutting the cord," but you don't see people saying, "Oh, I'm cutting the cord at $9.99." Like people talk about Spotify or Apple Music. They've got a good deal going.
Yeah, and see, like I can understand like the audio completely and like somewhat video, like, and I'm not saying that having a couple services isn't going to break you, but like with the plethora of how they're all like, well, I'm taking all of my toys and I'm putting them in my playground. You have to come to my playground to use my toys. Instead of like the conglomerates of like Hulu and Netflix, where you could kind of go in and you're like, oh, I get a variety package every month. You know, I don't know. Like I kind of feel like it's purposely like gatekeeping people out of things, and I get they want to control their own content instead of having to bow before the mighty Netflix after seeing how their business model worked and they made all this money. But like Disney, don't get me wrong, I get their reasoning for it. They have such a massive library, it's disgusting. Between what they owned anyway from like all their other studios and Disney and everything, and then having Marvel, and then having Lucasfilm, and then having the Muppets, and then having now Fox's library. I can completely understand them having their own, and especially when they used to do the DVD model of they're like, oh, we've got the silver edition, back to the vault, gold edition, back to the vault, platinum edition, back to the vault, double platinum, back to the vault, and they would just strangle $20 out of you every time. So I mean, I kind of get it, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to make people have to choose their poison.
Yeah, because I'd love to have access to all the Paramount and Warner Brothers stuff. I just don't know if I want to pay it, man. Like at that point, that drives me towards piracy. Because like the hell with it, man. Like it's going to be I'll be paying as much for the subscription services as I pay for monthly cable. And the only advantage monthly cable has is live.
And even that's not a big deal anymore because you can get YouTube Live, you can get, Hulu Live, you can get, depending on the shows, but you can still get some content live on these various networks.
And most specialty channels, like for example, the Food Network in Canada, I'm just a big fan of those shows like Chopped, Kids Baking Championship, and all that sort of junk. I like to watch those live. But you can typically watch them on the website. However, though, another thing is a lot of cable companies do is if you sign up with, say, Rogers, Comcast, or whoever, you sign into the broadcaster's website, you have access to streaming television anyway.
Yeah, if you've got a cable package that's high enough with those channels, yes, you can do that.
So that's yet another streaming service, so to speak. Like, it's a little bit much right now. And like you were saying earlier, I think there's only going to be a few contenders left. I think original content will rule the day, especially with Amazon having stuff like Good Omens, The Boys. They're putting a lot of money into that Lord of the Rings series. Netflix has got some fantastic movies. It had a really good run with the Marvel stuff. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens with a lot of these. Hulu and Disney, again, they have properties that will do well, but we don't have anything announced beyond the next 3 years for those services. So I feel
like the back catalog is not going to be enough to draw people to services. Yeah, I have a feeling, like you said, it's going to be the new stuff, and people are going to be making their decisions on what service they go to based on what's new.
See, I think one outlier to that is Disney. I think the reason people want Disney is because of the back catalog, but their day one offerings, they're not that impressive. Which is weird. In my opinion, there is no reason why Disney cannot have all the Disney afternoon stuff ready day one. There is no reason for it. I should be able to access the Wuzzles, the Little Mermaid cartoon, Timon and Pumbaa, Rescue Rangers, DuckTales, even the new stuff. I should be able to access that day friggin' one. And you can't. But what's the big draw? The Mandalorian, that Jeff Goldblum show. The other weirdness that happens to be on there. Plus, weirdly, there's like the Incredible Dr. Pol is on Disney Plus. There's like a Discovery Channel aspect to it or something. It's weird. So I don't know. Like, legacy content is good, especially in this era where physical media seems to be going away, going more towards the cloud and streaming. But like we've been saying this whole episode, I don't know if I want to pay it.
See, and that's the thing too, is like years ago, what's funny is a lot of the shows I really enjoyed, I either bought the DVDs. Granted, I've since traded them all in because it was a space issue. But I have specific episodes that were my favorite episodes of any given series. And I have them all on a flash drive. And that's where they reside. So if I ever feel nostalgic, I go back and watch that episode, and then I've got the best of the best, in my opinion. And I don't really care to see the rest of the series again. in most regards, like unless it's Trek, like I really don't go back and watch anything. That's literally the only series I will go back and watch, like that I have like access to, and that's about it. And it's I don't know, and that's really the only draw for CBS All Access for me, is because the new stuff that's coming up. But so switching gears slightly, but in the same vein, what do you think about websites and podcasts that are trying to do subscription models on their websites? Like they're gatekeeping people from, say,
The news?
Well, not the news, but like fictional drama podcasts or things of that nature.
You better be able to prove to me you're worth the money. And yes, actors and artists should be paid. You should compensate your artists. You should not do anything for free. But at the same time, it has to be worth it. And that's going to come up to the individual. Like, I don't know, like that's a difficult one, because one of the websites that do subscriptions are bloody annoying. Up here in Canada, one of the national newspapers, the Toronto Star, their app, you get 5 free articles and then you have to pay for it. To hell with that. You were free for years. I know you're struggling to survive in this new digital age. Should have thought about that. But that's a pain in the butt. But paying for an audio podcast, I guess if you enjoy it, pay for it. I mean, just make sure it's a reasonable amount.
Like, yeah, and see, I've seen, because I've kind of been, because I live in this world now, because I'm a producer of one. I've been kind of scanning around other programs to see how their business models are. And there's a couple that are comparable to us that, for instance, one of them, they gatekeep you from their website that looks like it's from 2006. Like it just looks severely dated. And they have you join their little club, and in order to listen to any of the podcasts other than the most recent one, which again, if you listen to the most recent one, you're lost because there's like decades of content. But they, I mean, you get some perks and everything else, but like it's like $10 a month for one show. And so like, in that regard, like I'm almost like it would be better to do like a separate thing for the club and have like the show for free, as like an enhancement type scenario to where it's optional. Like, I don't know. It's kind of like a weird situation. And I've seen a couple other shows do it differently. Like they've had like one of them's done by Gimlet, and they have money behind them. So it's a really well thought out, well done dramatization fictional podcast. but it's paid for with advertisers as opposed to making the listener pay. So I feel like that model is more up the alley for something that would be broadcast on, like radio, or something that would be broadcast on a podcast, as opposed to gatekeeping them in a subscription model. But I don't exactly know, because I've seen quite a few do both. And crickets.
Yeah, I'm gonna say like, it's going to be tricky to find out what business model works for you, especially considering how unpredictable this industry is. It's any site that decides to do it, it's a gamble, especially if they're a new podcast or a new website. You're taking a risk.
And see, that's what I feel like too, is like this whole subscription model thing has hit this plateau finally, and it's going to start doing this hard crash down.
Well, yeah, I mean, you look at websites, to go on the subscription model train again, we were talking about Patreon earlier. There's a Patreon crash. There's too many of them. And you don't know what's worth your time or worth your effort with these creators and content. And like I said earlier, yes, you should pay your artist, and artists should be paid, but how do you know if that's what you want to support? And I guess your country is always like, let your wallet speak for you. It's true, man. It's weird, but hey, party on. People will only know if the content's good if it's supported. The content could be fantastic, but no one's paying for it. So where do you find that distinction?
Yeah, and that's the difficult thing in figuring that out. So yeah, I don't know. It's definitely something that's worth weighing, but I definitely welcome the listeners to weigh in on this. Feedback at alteredgeek.com, or hit us up on Twitter. That's probably the easiest way. And I mean, I know some people prefer Facebook, and that's fine too. This will be on there as well. And we'll recap next week. So let us know So let us know what your thoughts are, and we'll read them on the podcast next week, and then we'll also answer the things that are geeky to all of us, including ourselves. What we have fun geeking out to, and whether it's technology, games, or media, there's a plethora of things under that category that works. It's all about getting altered, getting geeky. So
it's all about nude pictures of Betty White.
Why
That's
do you
right.
do that to me? Oh man, you're horrible. You're a wackadoodle. Anyways, so anything that you'd like to promote before we take off?
Yes, you can find me every other weekend at twitch.tv/Terrible Warriors. I do a bi-weekly Shadowrun 2nd Edition game with Justin Eacock and other Terrible Warriors on that show, where we fly through the adventures of Toronto 2054 with a varied crew of Shadowrunners, from street samurai to riggers to all sorts of other people in the Six world. It's dangerous, it's crazy, it's often stupid. So you should join us. It's fun. And as always, thisweekingeek.net, a weekly show on Mondays where we have the latest reviews in tech, movies, and other things. The mailman is constantly here, and I almost fall behind. But good stuff. We got a back-to-school guide coming up rather soon with Alex, so be looking for that. We should be having a new DVD commentary coming up with Vinegar Syndrome, where we review porn, but without the porn. Alex spends the time cutting out all the sex scenes, and we critique the movie as a movie, and the results are often hilarious and stupid.
That's actually really funny.
Yeah, it's weird. And some of these movies, you're like, I wonder how they're going to solve this. So stuff like that. So
You're like,
be
is
sure
the
to
movie coherent without all the garbage?
You know, it's weird. The movie Sex World was actually entertaining and had a weird philosophical bent to it. Like, I think the person who directed that movie went to film school and was like, I want to make a movie. Unfortunately, I have to have people boning. Maybe I can do both. Um, so stuff like that. So yeah, be sure to keep it locked to thisweekingeek.net for more great geek content. You can also hear me across the Chorus Radio Network occasionally. I just did a spot on CJOB talking about Gamescom, which is happening in Germany as of this recording. So I'm sure I'll be around to talk back to school and college at some point. So keep listening on the radio waves, folks. I'm always around. Oh yeah, one last thing. I did a tweet last week about a Pomeranian dressed as Paddington Bear.
I saw that.
That tweet has been seen by almost 1 million people.
You did that?
I'm not the originator, but I am one of the original people who I guess got retweeted by it. As of right now, I will give you a live update. Hold on. So let me look at my Twitter stats. Okay, so this thing has received 3,523 retweets, has been liked over 16,000 times, and has the impressions, aka the people that saw it on Twitter, 919,552.
Nice.
Yeah, not bad. A little dog brought me a little bit of Twitter fame, proving thus once and for all the world is not an entirely large dumpster fire.
Even though it seems like it often.
Oh my God, Twitter, what a cesspool. But occasionally we get puppies.
What's really funny is we talked about that years ago. About, about social media and bullying and how worthless it is. It was back in 2012, as a matter of fact.
My God, how things have changed. My God, it's worse.
We actually
now.
predicted this. I will
Can't
send you the
say
link.
surprised.
It is hilarious because it was you, me, Blanchard, and Dustimus Prime. Dustin Vancour. Yeah, we were discussing it and how much we predicted Twitter and social media to become the hate-filled place it is today.
You can't go on Twitter for 5 seconds without finding a bigoted racist. Isn't life grand?
I know it's like every 5 tweets. It's getting shorter too. But yeah. So anyways, you can of course listen to this podcast everywhere, whether it be on geekcastradio.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Spotify, TuneIn, and plethora of other places. So until next time, get altered, get geeky with the Altered Geeks.